moving on to scenario 2, anxiety. In terms of anxiety in scenario 2, we can firstly see that cognitive and possibly some somatic anxiety features are present in this particular scenario in relation to ones previously mentioned in the first scenario. For example, we can see these features in this particular scenario as Sarah struggles to concentrate in games and clearly tends to worry in these more important games. These are symptoms of cognitive anxiety which show that Sarah experiences these features when taking part in these particular games. This particular type of anxiety was defined as the negative expectations and concerns about one's ability to perform and the possible consequences of failure by McNally in 2002. This, in relation to Sarah, shows that she doubts her own performance in the more important games and does not believe in herself that she is capable of performing well in these games. This is evident in the fact that she displays this cognitive anxiety in the form of not being able to maintain concentration throughout the whole game, as well as thinking in a negative way. In addition to this, this also links into stress as she experiences distress in the games, which could also be a contributing factor as to why she experiences this cognitive anxiety, and these negative thoughts which make up her cognitive anxiety could be a result of this distress, meaning she perceives the demand as something she is not capable of when these big games occur. Although the scenario never said clearly that Sarah suffers from some somatic anxiety factors, it is likely that she also displays some of these symptoms as well as cognitive. These, for example, can range from increased muscle tension to clammy hands to high heart rate. It is also likely, due to Sarah's high levels of distress and cognitive anxiety during these games, that she will also experience some of these somatic features as a result of high stress and anxiety levels. In contrast to scenario 1, it is clear Sarah in scenario 2 has high levels of what is known as state anxiety, as opposed to Nick, who suffered from trait anxiety. State anxiety refers to right now feelings that change from moment to moment. State anxiety is a temporary, ever-changing mood state that is an emotional response to any situation considered to be threatening and can have cognitive or somatic effects. We can therefore clearly relate this particular form of anxiety to Sarah. This is due to the fact that she can perform well in these less important games, however struggles in the crunch games. Therefore, when she plays in these crunch games, she experiences this state anxiety, where her anxiety levels dramatically increase far beyond optimum levels and therefore cause this decrease in performance she sees. The reason this is state anxiety and not trait is because this is not consistent throughout all her performances in games like it was for Nick. We can see these high cognitive and possibly somatic anxiety levels only occur before and during these important games, and this therefore explains why her particular anxiety is only state instead of trait anxiety. Another form of anxiety we can see Sarah suffers from, which is also present in scenario 1, is known as competitive anxiety. This, as earlier mentioned, is where a performer specifically perceives competitive sporting situations as potentially threatening. This is clear in the case of Sarah as well as Nick. When the games become more important and competitive, this is where her levels of stress and anxiety increase. This means that she perceives this demand as a threat, causing distress due to the stress process, as well as showing the cognitive anxiety features such as negative thoughts and a lack of concentration. Therefore, it is evident that Sarah also experiences competitive anxiety when performing in these big games, as they are most important and therefore have a more competitive environment and increased pressure, which explains why she is able to perform well in these less important games and less competitive games. as well as explaining why her performance decreases so dramatically when taking part in competitive pressurized games due to the fact her distress and increased anxiety in these particular games. There are many factors affecting anxiety in general, as well as competitive anxiety more specifically. This is divided into two categories. These are pre-competition, meaning before the event has taken place, and during competition, meaning while the event is going on. Some pre-competition examples would be fear of failure, mistakes, bad performance, fear of importance of event, fear of injury, and more. In terms of Sarah, we can see some of these, especially fear of importance of the event, is a contributing factor towards her anxiety levels, as she plays worse in big games and better in less important ones. Some during competition factors affecting anxiety would be evaluations of others during competition, for example, crowd, opposition, interaction with others, friendly/aggressive decisions of officials, injury and fatigue, environmental influence, or weather. These are all factors that occur during the game that could contribute to increase a person's level of anxiety, as they are all things that could cause worry or negative thoughts, which, as we know, are symptoms of increased anxiety. There are many ways in which we can attempt to measure anxiety in sport and general anxiety levels. These can range from things such as observations to questionnaires to physiological factors like heart rate and sweat. These are all different ways in which we can measure a person's anxiety levels before and possibly during a sporting event. One method in particular I'm going to talk about is used to measure anxiety is known as a sport competition anxiety test, or also known as a SCAT test. This was devised by Martens in 1977 and is used to give an idea of performers' levels of state anxiety in competitive situations. This test is in the form of a self-report applied to specific sporting situations and has four main factors to it, consisting of individual differences of how performers interact with different situations, different types of anxiety they have experienced, trait or state, a specific anxiety trait they experience only in competitive situations, and the competition itself. These factors are all the things being measured during this test in order to attempt to measure a person's anxiety and particular anxiety traits common in them. This particular test is one of many and can be used in terms of scenario 1 and 2 due to the fact that it analyzes trait and state anxiety, which are both present in these different scenarios, as well as things such as competitive anxiety, which both Nick and Sarah possess. Therefore, this test would be a good way of measuring both Nick and Sarah's levels of anxiety, and overall is one of many used in order to measure levels of anxiety in sport, and is a successful method in order to do this, as well as many others that can be used.